Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV's World Edition, soon to be a part of the Roku television network. Live from the All America city of Morrisville in North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the United States of America, we welcome you from around the world and across the United States to our show. On this show, we talk about global affairs, innovation, and continue to talk about navigating through the pandemic, which seems to continue to rage on as millions are infected around the world, and the United States of America has surpassed well over 853,000 COVID deaths. This show today, as we follow the MLK show, is dedicated to freedom. We talked yesterday about Dr. King. We had a wonderful show with former state senator of North Carolina, Floyd McKissick. He talked about the legacy of his father, who fought alongside Dr. King. And we talked about voting rights and the dream today and how we realize that freedom for all Americans. Today, I want to bring your attention to an article I read this morning in the New York Times. It talks about another type of death we're seeing increase in the United States, that is homicides, murders. We haven't really talked about it much on this show, but murders and homicides are up by 27%, this article says, since 2020. Now, the numbers for murders and homicides came down between the 1991 and 2014. And the article doesn't cite, we don't really know why. It could be that more people were playing video games, they say. There were changes in policing. And all in all, there were more federal efforts made towards crime. But a large part of it could also be massive incarcerations and increased imprisonment of those who committed these crimes. Now, what we do know, I found it very appropriate to talk about this today on the show, is that we are seeing that the murder rates and homicide rates are higher among Black Americans and Black minority communities. In fact, today, the studies show that a Black American in a poor suburban neighborhood is 8 times as likely to die of gun violence. We're seeing this even in North Carolina, from where we sit today, where murders are up and gun violence is up. And the new mayor, Elaine O'Neill, and the mayor pro tem, Mark Anthony Middleton, along with the council, are working with the city of Durham to make sure they can address this significant challenge to the safety of their citizens. Now, I'll end with this, just a couple of ideas that the article gave, but I sort of agree with. There could be 3 basic reasons of why we're seeing increasing violence and murders. The first is the pandemic. Pretty much for 2 years, most social services organizations were eliminated. They cut their services. And so much focus has been on reducing infection rates, reducing deaths, distributing vaccines and boosters, identifying policies of masking. And schools have been in relative chaos, particularly after they've come back to live in-person instruction. So the pandemic played a significant role, perhaps, in the spike of murder rates. The second is public confidence in our police. Since the murder of George Floyd and other police violence incidents in the United States, much of the public in America has lost confidence in the police. And many police officers may not feel as comfortable being so proactive, working with neighborhoods and communities in addressing gun violence when they're afraid of getting caught in a viral video. And the rest, I think you know the story. We just don't know. And the final point is that gun purchases have gone up. We are monitoring the hostage situation in the Jewish synagogue in Texas. Almost every month, we talk about a school shooting, a gun shooting, a random murder. But all of this is because more guns are being sold, more people are buying guns, and more people are using these guns for violent attacks and murders. At the end of the day, I'll close out with this thought. We talked about freedom from racism and discrimination, but I also am concerned about whether the American people, all Americans, are living free from violence, free from homicide, free from the fear that they could be gunned down randomly because we're not controlling and looking at the facts and data, and that we're not also looking at the fact that disenfranchised minority communities are more vulnerable to this kind of violence. And if that's the case, is Dr. King's dream today ringing as true and as loud as it could be? We will be discussing this issue today with my panel. Today we have Mark Lee, our co host and producer, radio celebrity of the Roku network, Sasha Starr from Canada, and others from around the world who may be joining us.
We'll see
Welcome to
who
the
else joins
show.
us and everything. It's interesting you brought that story up and all of that because as you were talking, and yes, it has been a concern of a lot of people around the globe. I think there's even been incidences of definitely shootings and other things around the globe in this sense of violence and all that. I don't know if it's strong in the United States. I'd love to hear Sasha's views of how things are going in that relation in Canada. But I was looking at some of the news stories just on one of the news outlets, and I saw that there was an Indianapolis case where a person had been identified in a murder suicide, and then there was another case in terms of trials that were going on that were following in that same line of what you were talking about. Because even here in North Carolina, there was a dad accused of killing his teen son and two other relatives in a shooting at a North Carolina shopping center, and of course there was testimony to continue in the trial of a gunman in another part of the country on that mass shooting that had taken place in 2017. And there was in Louisville, a Louisville man in connection with the shooting of an 8-year-old at a playground. So you're right, a lot of these are definitely very sad occasions, and you can't figure out why anybody would do that to these young people, particularly those that have not even had a real opportunity to enjoy life as of yet and all of that. But Sasha, I was wondering, is it as prevalent or do you hear about as much of it in Canada and other parts of the globe that you are familiar with as much as we hear it in our news media? And Steve is right. It is oftentimes there, whether it's a mass shooting like what happened in the schools over there in Columbine and numerous other ones, or even the nightclub that I believe was in Florida and all of that. But how prevalent is this in Canada and other parts of the globe that you are connected with?
Okay, I would think that people have many type of dangers in their lives these days. Mass shooting, yeah, it's one. It's probably less prevalent in Canada, but it's a clear and present danger in U.S. You can be really mass shoot. You have good chances that you or your loved ones will not come back from school or from wherever they're working. There is another danger is nuclear war, which
Mm-hmm.
is I think now is getting close to 75% to actually happen, and especially now, I was listening to to Russian talk shows. Now they're discussing that it's not true that all mankind will be killed during the nuclear exchange. In fact, a lot of people will survive, and the probably it will cost about 50 to 60 million lives. But considering the fact that there are 7 billion people on Earth, so that's acceptable loss, give or take.
Yeah, and the reason I brought up this topic today, gentlemen, is that you know there were two reasons why. I mean, first of all, there is data that shows that more of these are occurring in segments of neighborhoods among minority communities, and we're talking a lot about voting rights and freedom, but that also, in terms of racial disparities, are we doing enough at a policy level? And it doesn't seem to be talked about as much, right? And then just looking at the reasons for why we're seeing it in the U.S., just the pandemic, so much focus has been on the vaccines, the boosters, masking, mask mandates, all of these things that we haven't really focused on. Why are gun sales up? Who's getting a hold of the guns? You know, why are these murders occurring? So, and a lot of people have died from just random gun violence.
Right.
And, I think, but, Sasha, you raised a good point. I mean, people are dying every day from all kinds of things. We often don't talk about the civilian and military casualties in Afghanistan. Those numbers were well over 10, 12,000. Uh, you know, it's not something that's brought up a lot. So,
Right.
I
Um,
think, it's just it's a tough time for all of us. And hopefully, once COVID is over, if it ever is, we can get back to identifying other issues going on in the world.
And some of
Oh,
those issues.
so I forgot also to mention, of course, coronavirus, that it's probably not as lethal as it was in the first
No.
year or so, but it's still there, and a lot of people are still dying, believe it or not, from the coronavirus.
80, yeah, and I try to stay away from talks about vaccinations, but anything on this show, I actually cite CDC data, and the CDC data does show that you are 81% more likely to die of COVID-19 or the variants if you have not had a if you are not vaccinated. So if you
Yeah.
had two shots and a booster, you're probably going to be okay. But it's the people that are not vaccinated. Um, However, the strategy is shifting, right? Because what we're finding is those who get Omicron who are vaccinated and boosted or vaccinated are getting more like a cold, you know?
Also,
And so,
because human behavior is not really changing much, even if centuries apart. And I was reading lately about the Hundred Years' War in Europe and the Black um, Death situation. And interestingly enough, there were two different approaches. There were a lot of people who were trying just to survive, to do anything, whatever they can, just to survive, nothing more, nothing else. There are other people, and there were a lot of, for example, a lot of women were wearing very short dresses, and so as men. A lot of promiscuity was at that time because people believed that next day they might be dead, so they might as well to get whatever pleasures from life they can while they're still alive. So, is that a strategy or some kind of approach today which exists? I'm not familiar with that much, but could be. So, therefore, the gun violence, what you were just discussing before, might be a product of beliefs that who knows what's happened tomorrow, but let's live today the best we can. And by the time that you will be prosecuted and get your jail time or so, maybe the world won't be around anymore anyway. So why would you worry about that?
and I
So
think
you
it's
bring up
also,
some interesting points and everything. One of them
right.
is that definitely a lot of times people, when they think, as Steve was bringing up about the youth violence, and the youth violence is happening in the African American and the Hispanic community, a lot of that is around identity, but it's also around having a need for some sort of structure. So sometimes they may not have the right family structure, or they might not have enough kind of like places where they are feeling welcomed and wanted. So a lot of times that is why, and my brother has done work in that gang field, they will actually go into that gang environment. You know, a lot of times they're not thinking about the consequences, and sometimes they're even learning tactics that if they actually could put those tactics into a more productive sense, they could actually do well, because there are some people in that gang mentality that are also very good in a criminal way, business people, and they learn some good business skills in the sense of supply and demand and other things along those lines. We just need them to turn it more away from, say, the mafia kind of crime or just crime in general into actually more successful businesses, kind of like what you've run and other business folks have run as well. So that's one of the things that I would hope that they would learn is, if they're going to develop the skills, develop them in a way that can make money that is legal and is not going to run them afoul of the law and all of that. So that's one of the
Yeah.
things that I was thinking about as you were talking. Another thing that I was wondering about is you talking about nuclear war. And I don't remember when I was a kid, if it was when I was very young, those whole kind of like, had underneath a table and all of that kind of stuff that was supposed to help and everything. I don't know that the school system or any school system here, I imagine they are in Russia and other parts of the world, are even preparing their kids to deal with what would happen if a nuclear blast happened. Because like you said, it would destroy quite a bit of the population, and who knows who would survive and everything. But there are things that you probably can do to at least mitigate your risk. Maybe if you've got access to an underground tunnel or something like that, but or get some of the supplies that you might need to survive in the sense of that kind of doomsday scenario. So I was just wondering to both of you, do you think that our school systems are doing enough even preparation to even think about the possibility of this happening? And are they doing that in other parts of the globe?
I personally don't believe it's something that's brought up as much anymore. I think that we, I think, realize maybe there's an assumption that there's not as much danger for nuclear war. I don't know why that is. Maybe because it's been going on so long and the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States is over. But there are a lot of these states that have nuclear weapons. North Korea, they could fire one probably and it could hit the West Coast. Um, so, maybe it needs to be brought up. And during our time, there was a movie called The Day After Tomorrow.
Mhm.
I think The Day After with Jason Robards, which was about what would happen if there was a nuclear attack. It was very scary, just with the nuclear winter and that kind of stuff. But I don't know whether it's, although Canada has always been sort of known as a nation of peace, really staying out of a lot of conflict. Um, so I'm not sure what the Canadian perspective is, although you're sort of caught in the middle.
Well, Canada actually participated in both World War, in first one and
Oh
in
yeah,
second
of
one.
course, yeah.
Yeah, and however, I would like to mention that when I was a kid in a Russian or Soviet at that time school system, we had at least twice a week drills how to shelter yourself in the case of nuclear attack. We were going down to the bomb shelters. They were quite popular actually. There were huge number of bomb shelters to almost any area of the city, and so the drills were held and so on. Now, the belief what the Russians are now saying that because there was a mutual assured destruction was on the belief as at the time of a Cold War, at the peak of Cold War, there were 65 thousand nuclear warheads that could actually destroy all humankind. But after several treaties, that number was substantially reduced. So today, even all nuclear bombs that are still around, all will be detonated. It's not enough to kill even half of the population, or even 10%. So there will be a loss. They talking about now about say 50 million people. It's a huge loss, but acceptable loss because in the case you win the war, you win it once and for all, and therefore, and after that you will live in peace and enjoy. The fruits of your labor and so on and so on. It's it's kind of scary simply because of the fact that many people who live today and making the decision, political decision, war decision, and all kinds of decisions, they haven't been around in 1945. They don't understand what's happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and
Right.
today's warheads, they are 1,000 times as capable as those that were used for Hiroshima and Nagasaki attacks. So I'm very skeptical on this calculation of 50 million dead. Why not 55? Is it exactly 50 and that's done? It's not. It cannot be 55 million or 75 or 145. What's the right
Right.
number? Pick and
So,
guess.
well, anyway, it's a wonderful conversation, and I think we might want to bring on a guest to talk about nuclear deterrence, nuclear warfare, the reality of nuclear war, what would happen if there was a nuclear war. But let's shift back to our conversation of the day before we get to some international news. Well, as we were speaking with Senator McKissick yesterday, we were talking about voting, and pretty much it looks like the voting rights legislation is dead on arrival. But I know that Shaquille Latimer, who hasn't been with us for a few weeks, has often challenged us about why we make race such a big issue. But I want to mention that uh, you know the Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin said on one of the news shows on Sunday that we all sort of need to, you know, live with Dr. King's vision of not being judged by the color of our skin, but the content of our character. And that is idealistic thinking. And I think it's a good thing to start there. But the fact is, I think you have to look at the data. And I want to emphasize that the data that I'm sharing is data that is national data that is from a lot of demographic sources in the census in the country. When we talk about incarceration, there is a significantly number. I think it's like 25% or more of African American men, black men are incarcerated. Only 45 million black Americans own a home compared to 75%. And then some of the data that I just shared with gun violence. So the data shows that there has been and of course, Hispanic minorities and other minorities may be subject to this. But I want to throw it to Nick and then Mark. Why are we getting away from this data when we're making policy decisions? Do you believe it's because of the sensationalism of the media, which we're in? Well, we're not in. That's what makes Pod TV different. Is that we're trying to bring data-based, fact-based um, uh, information and views and having healthy debates on the issues respectfully rather than just coming in and what are your thoughts about that panel?
Well, if you want to respectfully, if you look at how they're couching it, and I'm talking about the Democratic Party, which I'm a member of, it's almost tantamount to misrepresentation. First of all, they start off voting rights. Okay, it's not like you're losing your voting rights, and they're trying to
Yeah.
oversell their case. I got to listen to Elizabeth Warren, the great overseller of all times. They're overstating their case, counselor, is what they're doing, acting like, oh, you're not going to have voting rights. No, what they're doing though, on a state by state basis, they do have things that they're putting in there, little jabs to make it more difficult for people to vote. It's not like your voting rights are going away. It's like the states, in some cases the municipalities, are making it more difficult for people to vote. But they're overstating their case when they're talking about voter suppression, sort of garbage. In other words, you still have the right to vote. It's just not going to be handed to you on a silver platter. So I think that's a big problem that I think when I hear this, they're not being specific at all, at least on the media. They talk in what I call amorphous terms or like an amoeba terms rather than saying, and let me go specifically, like Adam Lampereau would do a 100 times better job than these guys are doing. And he's on our lawyers' net by saying, number one, in Houston, they had only one ballot box. Okay, I mean that's like, okay, I see that's a serious problem in a city that has 4 million people. There's only one place in the whole city you can drop by your ballots. They were never specific on it, Steve. They have done a absolutely horrible job in presenting their case to the American public, and they couch it in these big terms. Oh, voter suppression, threats to democracy, all this other garbage. And
Well, I
frankly,
think
we're not eating the garbage. We're not
but
going to eat the
I want to
independent people
interject
aren't going to
there.
eat garbage.
I'm going to interject there and then bring
Sure.
Sasha and Mark. I think part of the problem is that yeah, there have been efforts to disenfranchise voters in certain areas in certain cities. For example, by requiring a voter identification, that is making sure that there are minority communities in many states that do not have an ID, and by requiring them to have an ID, they wouldn't be able to vote. And so this is a strategy by the Republican Party to make sure that they eliminate the base of a growing base of the Democratic Party. But I do agree that it may not be as bad, like you cannot vote or they're going to block you from going to vote. If you have a right to vote, if you have today in America, you can go vote. But the question is, they're making it harder by reducing mail-in ballot sites,
Okay.
by reducing their hours of early voting. But let me finish.
But
But the
Okay.
second component, guys, that we're not talking about, and this is my question to the panel, outcomes of elections. So much focus by the Democrats has been on voting rights that they're not focusing on the growing number of states that are changing the laws so that if a presidential election doesn't go my way, I can put new electors in. Okay. I can take powers from the attorney general, from the secretary of state in Arizona, and move it to the Republican attorney general. Now, my question is, don't you believe that is a more critical concern at this point that needs to be addressed in addition to voting rights? I'm going to start with you, Sasha, then Mark Lee.
I think that democracy is something that is not just given to you and taken for granted. That's something what you have to fight for. And if majority of people don't believe that fighting for democracy is worth anything, for various reasons, whatever it might be, either the everybody will die because of the coronavirus or nuclear war or anything else. So then you don't fight for it, and you allow to do just anything, whatever happened, whatever happened. And other people are more practical and say, okay, I can fight for democracy. Can I make any money out of it? No, it's impossible to make money out. Okay, I'm not interested. Whoever is interested, you fight, and whoever is not interested, we are not going to fight, and that's the end of story. So it is. America is therefore in a crossroads. Whether it will be able to sustain the democratic tradition and including the election, or it will just forgo it and say, okay, do whatever you want.
Yeah, but let's get to this voter ID
Yeah,
thing. Okay, I mean, the thing is, this is another piece of garbage. How much garbage do you think people are going to listen to? Okay, if you can have voter ID, and don't tell me, oh, I don't have an ID. Here's how you do it. This is real simple. You go to the voting booth. They have a little camera. They press a button, and they give you an ID. Now, how do I know they can do this today? Because when I was in Greece, my wife lost her passport. And, oh, we can't do a passport. It takes months. And we said, baloney. Once we paid $400, it took 2 hours. And frankly, maybe only an hour to do this. It is not a big process. Believe it or not, we have the technology to take photographs today. People can walk into voting booths. Oh, I don't have a picture ID. No problem. Here's the booth. Click. Here's your picture. Here's your registration. Here's your voting card, and move on. Why are we arguing about this? Then there's nothing to argue about. And
But they're making it.
Nick, hold on a second. Hold on a second. You're being a little bit too quick
because it's
on
too
the
bloody
simple
simple.
solutions and everything. First off, I've been to a couple of voting booths in the last several years. Don't remember seeing a camera in any of them or anything. I agree, they probably could have done that and everything. But there's also a lot of the things that you're talking about in terms of getting the ID. Well, in order to get the ID, you also need your social security card. Not everybody has a social security card. You also need to be near some place that you can get the social security card. You got to have other forms of identity and all of that. So like I said, there is not just like a simple process, and some people don't always have the things that you're talking about, or might not even be accessible to them, because there are parts of North Carolina even that the closest voting place is like, several miles away. If you ain't got a car, you're not getting there. So like I said, there is accessibility issues as well. Now, if you want to drive there and be the one that drives around and makes the trip to get these people registered, which some people have done, and that's actually what Martin Luther King was doing. He was actually going around and actually traveling to make sure that people were registered in the time of the 60s. Could we do that again? Yes, and that probably would be a good move in the sense of getting the people that are in parts of the community that are not able to get their IDs. And I've actually been part of efforts like that done through different projects that I've been part of. And sometimes we would go to the bus terminals, we might go to other places, and there was a constant effort to try to get people registered. But it's not as simple as you think it is, and definitely not this whole thing of gentrification. Gentrification is a deliberate attempt to try to make voting districts a certain kind of way. It might be Republican, it might be other kinds of
the gerrymandering that exists in this state is just absolutely incredible. I mean, it's a national disgrace. Any computer program, look at North Carolina and cry. But what I'm saying is the technology is there, okay? And the thing is the barriers can be lifted. Now, the arguments on the other side, obviously, Mark, is that the states aren't trying to lift the barriers and make this a simple process. It really does fall on the states to do this. The states could make this a very simple process, just like the federal government could in Greece do it. And we had to yell and scream at them, literally, to get a bloody passport, because we knew, we're not stupid people, that they have a photograph machine and they can issue the passport like that. Okay, you can issue voter IDs in this country like that. Okay, the real problem is you create these artificial barriers. Where's your social security card? Where's your last address? Where's your electric baloney? The guy showed up. There's a human being there. Give them a bloody ID, take their little picture, Find out where their last known address is.
Hey,
If they don't have one, and let them bloody vote.
Nick, but that
Then
raises the
get right.
question. That even raises questions in terms of the Republicans, the Democrats, gentrification, and everything else. Let's be very honest. This is a very much of a change in society. While those in control, and I brought this up to you on another show recently, and everything, it might have been with the one with Floyd. While those in control are primarily older white Americans and everything, those that are becoming the greater part of the population is very much of a minority population. I think the estimates are that by 2025 or 2026, because of the growing Hispanic population, a somewhat growing Asian population, and definitely still a growing African American population, that the entire minority community will be very much the majority in the U.S. population. And if you are not the majority and you still want to maintain control, then you might do things to suppress those votes because you don't want them in control. And I'm going to bring up something that I think Steve might be shocked that I might be bringing up as well. I do think that something that you're saying is very true, which is that sometimes on both sides, on both the hard right side and the hard left side, we get too caught up in people that are too stuck in their ways on both of those extremes. I do think that the Democrats do need to find more moderate candidates, more candidates like Steve. So we need more candidates like Steve out there on the national and the local landscape, because definitely there are folks that will reach across the bridge and everything. I'm not sure that I think that Manchin is quite that person, or even Sinema, because I did hear what Dr. King's granddaughter said about Sinema and the whole Voting Rights Act and everything.
Let's go into it. So that's a great topic before we get into some national issues, but I think it's an important conversation to have is about so first of all, I'll say I want Sasha to, I think we know where Sasha stands on voter ID. They have it in Canada. But the question from policy perspective, Nick, is that they're mandating a government issued ID. And there are some people in America who don't have that. And the data shows that they're in communities that are traditionally poor or minority communities. So it is a strategy. The Republicans aren't doing this because of pragmatic reasons. They're doing it. It's a sport. It's a full contact sport. You're doing whatever you can to hold the majorities so you can control the outcomes of elections. So let's be clear. That's what's going on here.
But you need to explain it. See, this is the real problem. It needs to be
Yeah,
explained
they're not explaining that.
specifically. Let's go specific, like 1, 2, 3, and unfortunately, specifically, I have to go to another meeting.
Sasha Starr, you have please.
Okay, because we have international audience, so it would be probably good to clarify exactly a few issues. Number one, for example, in several countries, including Russia, for example, you are not allowed even to be on the street without your, not just ID, any ID, passport. You must have a passport always with you. If you are on the street and you're stopped and you don't have passport, you will be taken to police to clarify who you are, what you are, why you are without passport. You will be fined, and you'll be lucky actually to get home the same day. There are several countries that require some similar thing to have some kind of at least internal document issued by government to identify yourself at any time, never mind election. Now, I would like to understand, so who are the people who are interested to vote, yet they don't have any proof of identity, they don't have any document? If you don't have any document, okay, that means you cannot open a bank account. So if a person doesn't have a bank account, how does he make his living? Is he getting paid cash only, and he's operating in a cash environment, and they don't have bank account or credit cards or nothing like that? Do you think is it fair that these people will have the same rights to vote as people who do have bank accounts, who do have access to modern financial institutions and so on? So do you think that their vote is justified in this situation? So what they're doing, it's unclear how they actually earn their living. Maybe they are just outright criminals. If they don't have ID, they don't have bank accounts, they are nobodies. Yet they want to vote. They want to vote without IDs, without anything. They're just interested to vote. I cannot picture that as a valid situation where I would be sympathetic to these people and say, yeah, okay, well, it's too bad you don't have ideas, but listen, you're welcome. Come to vote. Why not? I can't add to really to this circumstance. I really can't see it clearly.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's there's I've spoken to moderate Republicans that just say it's as simple as having an ID. Why can't you have an ID? Why is it that hard? And it might be the fact that they're requiring it, but I don't know. It's but let's get to the filibuster. You know, I got asked a question the other day. Well, isn't doesn't Senator Sinema have a point that the filibuster um, is a way to encourage compromise, and that you shouldn't just push legislation through. But don't you all believe that the filibuster requiring a supermajority on pretty much anything the Senate does is it's being used as a way to obstruct the political process? Because McConnell used it 92 times when Obama was president, and now you can use a filibuster by just sending an email. So my question is, how does that encourage compromise? Couldn't you amend the filibuster rules so that in certain instances, like a voting rights bill or different types of legislation, in countries like Denmark, I don't know how it is in Canada, you use a supermajority only when you amend the Constitution or issues like that. What are your all's thoughts about Senator Sinema's arguments about the filibuster?
I think she's obviously betraying her own party, depriving people who voted for Democrats in Senate. They believed that, okay, we are going to vote for Democrats because my vote will help them to get majority in Senate, and therefore the decision-making process when they will decide certain issues, they will have majority. So they got the majority. On the other hand, to Cinema and Manchin, they are betraying the Democratic Party for various reasons. And I'm not going to state them here. But so you see, the Biden got into trap, believing that he and Democrats have majority both in House and Senate. In reality, he doesn't. So therefore, a lot of his policies were breaking into the wall, and unfortunately, he's losing his ratings and popularity, and he lose everything simply because of the fact that he did not anticipate that he will be betrayed on the highest level, and therefore all his politics, policies, everything is wrong, just 100%. So now we are facing a situation where filibuster is makes all the things even more horrible and more difficult, and you cannot get rid of it. So essentially, Biden could resign just today. That would be honorable way to end the presidency, because he is absolutely paralyzed all the way, and there is nothing will change it.
Yep,
That's a reality.
about to lose some issue. I'm having some computer issues, folks. But if I reboot, I might have to be reboot. but but anyway, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a significant challenge. The president's approval ratings are hovering around 42%. Um, Not looking good in terms of the fact that he wasn't able to get this legislation done. He loses support from the base, the progressives and activists, um, and they may be demotivated going into this off-year elections. If you look at Arizona, Trump had a huge following out there, a lot of energy. I'm beginning to believe that he will run again. Um, at this point, I thought it was not going to happen, but it's he's making everything clear just by his body language, and he is the leader of the Republican Party. Mark, do you think he's running again for president?
Yeah, I think that he's definitely going to run again, and it actually scares me that he's going to run again as well. But I definitely think that that's something that he's going to do, and it's very scary to even think that he's going to have that happen in his life and all of that. But I definitely think that that's going to be something that happens. But Sasha, I had a quick question for you and everything, which is something that I just heard about recently, which I did not realize was a problem, but apparently it is a problem in the world, in other parts of the world, and that is this whole concept of food. And I know that food is a big issue and everything, but apparently there have been like some food conspiracy kind of things. I was watching a recent documentary and they were talking about like something in, I think it was Belgium, and it was like where mincemeat had been actually identified as being more like horse than actual cow, and apparently they called it horse gate, and this was like a few years ago. But there's been investigations into this, so I was wondering, is this as prevalent as we think it is? I remember a friend of mine, even locally, remembered many decades ago going and seeing a local fast food restaurant, and they were at a horse auction. So they couldn't figure out why a fast food restaurant would be at a horse auction. But when I was watching this documentary, and of course we all remember Super Size Me and some of those other ones, I was just wondering, is this as prevalent as we think it is in the world? And I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Food is, of course, the biggest problem, because without food, you cannot live, period. Either you're a Republican or a Democrat or a communist or whoever you are, you cannot survive without food. However, with the modern technology, there is abundance of food, actually. What is that? There's some sound just coming through somewhere. Oh, okay, thanks. Okay, so with abundance of food, thanks to modern technologies, it should not be a problem. The only thing is that the prices could continue to climb higher and higher, simply because of the A, inflation, B, transportation, which consumes a lot of gas, and of course transportation is becoming more and more an issue. So food will be more expensive, that's true, but it should not be scarce. However, for some people who cannot afford to pay for it, it could be an issue, that's for sure.
Yes, absolutely. It is. Hey, so let's go to some international news real quickly. The big, guys. I mean, it's unbelievable that it does look like. So Novak Djokovic is probably back in Serbia now. Um, Australian Open is going on. It's looking like the French Open, which will be the next major, is saying that they're not going to bend on their rules. Um, and so, he's going to miss two majors this year because he refused to get a shot. I
Hey,
guess
what about Wimbledon and U.S. Open? What's
they
happening
haven't
there?
really mentioned that yet.
Oh, okay.
I have a friend of mine. This is surprising. I don't know if it's a rumor, but there's a rumor going around on the ATP circuit that Djokovic he's gonna quit. That he's just gonna retire from tennis because he just doesn't want to play anymore. And this whole experience, so that'll be if that happens, I guess he'll take his name out of the hat. I can't believe that he would train his entire life to be going down as the greatest player in the history of the game, and then just because of something like this would quit. So you really wonder about all the people that are depending on him and the staff. Maybe he'll. I hope he doesn't quit, but he may be forced to at this point because if Wimbledon and the U.S. Open also follow suit, then he could be banned from the tour for 2 to 3 years. What are your thoughts? Which
My
would then
thoughts
take him.
are okay. He has two priorities, absolutely conflicting ones, and they cannot survive together. Okay, on one hand, he definitely wants to win at least one major, as to pass Federer and Nadal, based on the fact that most likely they will never win even one major. Number two, his beliefs, according to his personal circumstances, that he is quite vocal anti-vaxxer. And for him, to lose completely his faith and say, well, you know what? After all, I was wrong being active-vaxxer. It's not good for you to be active-vaxxer. I just made my shots, I'm vaxxed, and now I'm ready to play. So it requires a huge amount of conviction, betray everything what he was saying before, to completely lose his face. And on the other hand, he wants to win at least one more major. How is going to navigate these two and be on the right side in both cases? I don't see it at all. It's just impossible. He has to really, really lose his face. Maybe in that case he will be able to win. But you see, the likelihood of his winning even one major are not great, because Medvedev and Zverev are formidable opponents, and most likely they will cream him anyway.
But you can't commit. You can't count out Nadal. I mean, he's got. If he gets healthy, he could win the French another one or
Yes,
two times.
French is another story. But Nadal still
Yeah,
can win French. And the only guy
French.
who stopped him from winning French last year was Djokovic himself.
I know, and then he got. I know. Well, anyway, I don't know. I mean, Mark, what is your thought? I mean, do you just think that in athletics, and we're going to be doing some specials on the Winter Olympics? Forget that's going to happen in a few weeks. But what are your thoughts? I mean, do you think that the sports federations should just require vaccinations and that nobody is no
Yeah, I
except
mean, unless there's a reason for them not to be vaccinated, I definitely believe that if people have true religious objections or true other objections, that they should be given that right. But I haven't heard him explain why he's not getting vaccinated. And definitely there's even some football players, including one that plays for a team that I'm not that big a fan of, the Green Bay Packers, that is also got some of those same issues and everything. But unless you're going to give me a concrete explanation, I'm not really feeling it and all of that. So I definitely think that they should be able to tell you why they are doing it and give a good reason and all of that. But I'm not hearing that in the least bit. So I would love to have people actually give a reason for that and make it a concrete reason. But everything I'm hearing is a bunch of BS, and that just put it bluntly and all of that. But definitely I need him to give a concrete reason and not just I'm the best player in the world and this kind of like conceited attitude, which is what I'm hearing from him.
Well, what he was saying is that he's a big believer in natural healing process. Now, he's downplaying his religious beliefs for some reason, but it's a big part of Orthodox doctrine that the God created a perfect body, and anything injected inside of that perfect body can only harm and do no good. So he's believing that because of his ultimate health condition, he can fight anything, including coronavirus, and just naturally. So he can actually get sick and recover fairly quickly, and that's not a big deal. As far as being spreader to other people, I think he's too selfish to admit that that could be a problem. So for him, it's not a problem, and that's where he is. And I don't know how much he's willing to sacrifice to in order to be able to be eligible to play in future Grand Slams.
I yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. On other fronts of the news, there's a dark a cloud emerging from the earthquake, the volcanic eruption in Tonga. Some scientists say that this could be a forewarning of a tsunami that could be hitting us close to the west coast, um, and that's sort of scary. Dr. King's family is. Oh yeah, there was also an earthquake in Afghanistan, killing 27, and the King family is still asking Biden to commit to getting the voting rights legislation passed. And I just saw the movie Selma the other day again, and remember the scene where Lyndon President Johnson was in with the great actor who played Martin Luther King. He was magnificent. Who was that, Mark? Who played MLK in Selma the movie?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I'd have to
Yeah,
look it up. I
but
don't think it
the
was Don.
president
Was
told
it Don
the president,
Cheadle?
yeah, that's it. But the president told Dr. King, well, it's not a priority, and he said it's got to be a priority because if people can't vote, they can't get on the jury, and if they can't get on the jury, then whites are just doing all these things against blacks, and then they're getting off for free, and eventually, you know, the president did it. He got voting rights legislation passed, but hopefully we'll see that. And then there's Eric Adams, the new mayor of New York, is pledging he wants public safety to be his top priority. And then there was a killing on a subway recently. And then the final thing is Russian embassy is emptying out its embassy. So a lot of people think that's a precursor for looming war with the Ukraine. Sasha, are we going to war in the Ukraine, or do you think it's just Putin calling our bluff and wanting to fight
Well, the
sanctions?
problem is Putin put his demands or ultimatum, whatever you want to call it, and it was flatly rejected in the most humiliating way for Putin. So now Putin is fighting very hard because of his upcoming trip to China on the Winter Olympics, where he is going to meet Chairman Xi. He is coming there empty-handed. So he gave ultimatum, was rejected, and he couldn't do anything about that. Furthermore, he had some participation in Kazakhstan, and China told him to get out of there, and he did it in a matter of 24 hours. So right now he's caught red-handed, and he has to come up with some goods. What kind of goods it could be? It definitely will be some kind of action against Ukraine, because he has no guts to start a huge war with West and United States. But Ukraine is a different story. It's right there on the border. It's fairly easy target. And at the same time, he will check resolve of the West and the United States to do anything about it. So that's why I think the likelihood of military action against Ukraine is fairly high, maybe 75%.
Well, folks, get ready for potential war in Russia. It's more and more like a Tom Clancy novel coming true. All of the things going on in the world. I'm just waiting for the alien mothership to come over my house and the apes to get out of the zoo and start talking. I mean, it's
That's not happening, Steve. You're gonna have to deal with the reality of the world. It's not happening.
I don't know if you look at everything going on, the last 5 to 10 sci-fi movies, it's all starting to come true. Or is a meteor headed towards the Earth?
Steve, there is another problem with this Ukraine affair. Okay, nobody needs Ukraine, and let's see, West can just largely ignore it. But then it will be tested the resolve to help Taiwan in case of China will attack it. It also will clarify whether U.S. and West will do anything about the Baltic republics or even Poland and some other European countries, East European countries mostly. So it's going to be a big test, and I think Putin. To tell the truth, he has no choice. He must attack Ukraine simply because otherwise he completely losing his face. He's becoming, actually, people will laugh at him, and he may lose as a result. He may lose his power at home, and if that happens, he will be in jail, and very quickly. So he has no choice, in my opinion.
Hmm. This is interesting times, folks. We're getting ready for closeout, but just a few more topics. I mean, we are going to hopefully bring in some different guests. I think the week after next, I'd like to have someone from the Indian embassy come and talk about India Republic Day, what's going on in the democracies. We're reaching out to Swethas Chatterjee, former ambassador Richard Verma, maybe Sanjay Puri from the U.S. India Political Action Committee to talk about India, what's going on in India, and the role of India in the changing world. I mean, with China and North Korea and now Russia, is the U.S. India relationship even more important? But there have been concerns about India's democracy and some of the things that are going on. So we'll be discussing that and getting ready for Black History Month, where we plan to bring in some different Black leaders to talk about that, along with the Winter Olympics. And then by March, make sure your Roku devices are set so that we will be on your TV, hopefully. Um, and until I get help, this will be the set. But I've been told to wear a tie from now on. So here I am. So wearing my bipartisan purple. Any final thoughts, gentlemen?
Now, just one quick final thought is definitely that, and this the other thing I was going to ask Sasha was when I was talking to some friends of mine, they were telling me that we were talking about food earlier, that microwaves have actually been not accepted in Canada because they were mentioning some places that microwaves were not being accepted because of food safety. And I was going like, I think they still have microwaves in Canada, but I'm going to ask Sasha because they were saying that it was not being accepted and it had been banned in definitely some Asian countries, and I thought they said Canada, but do y'all have microwaves there? That was my quick question.
Microwaves?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Of course.
yeah.
Cool, because they were saying that they were banned in certain countries because of certain things that were going on in the terms of health concerns. So they definitely mentioned a couple of countries. I thought Canada was one, but definitely there were some European countries, and I thought that there was like 2 or 3 because of health concerns that they were having. That's why I was asking.
Well, microwave, it's been around now for what, 40, 50 years, and it's been okay so far. No, not that I love microwave, and I'm trying not to use it very often, but I mean, it's there. And I think it's there to stay because of the convenience.
Gotcha.
Well, as we continue to, I'm going to wait and see if there's any other issues, and we've got about 2.5 minutes left, so I might begin my closeout. But I guess I'll begin my closeout with just um, talking about our focus on freedom this week and the challenges we're facing dealing with this pandemic in the world. And I got to tell you, I want to turn my attention to the NFL football league because I have been absolutely amazed this last couple of months with the level of play by all of the teams in the NFL that are still in, whether it's the Buccaneers, the Bengals, the Bills, the Raiders, the Chiefs, the Packers, and each one of these teams has an incredible quarterback, incredible stars. And I got to tell you, I don't know if I'm the only one that feels this way, but I don't really know who will win the Super Bowl. Although you've got to like your chances on Tom Brady.
You gotta
Uh,
like your chances on Tom Brady, but he's going up against Matthew Stafford, who's already beat him. So this could be one of them cases where he actually goes down and everything. But I'm not gonna put any money against Tom Brady because that would be like throwing money into the wind. There's a good chance that you're gonna lose that money if you bet against him.
but my point is this: as I close out the monologue, because I love to speak in metaphors. If there's anything that's proven in football, it is, as Al Pacino said in Any Given Sunday, a game of inches. And it's how willing you are to fight and die for that inch that makes it all the difference. And Pacino goes on in the movie to say it's the difference between winning and losing, living or dying. And the question becomes, how bad do we want our democracy to function? How bad, as we Americans, do we want a government that's working for all of us? And just like the NFL, people from all walks of life, from all ethnic groups are coming together from different backgrounds, but when they work together as a unit and we watch that team move the ball down the field with only minutes left, you just say to yourself, anything can happen on any given Sunday. And I think that to me is uplifting and inspiring when I watch these incredible games. And it should be inspiring for all of us because if we could just push ourselves a little bit to work with each other, we might find ourselves in a better position. Let's get to first down. Thank you all so much. Looking forward to a great NFL season closeout for people fighting for the coveted Vince Lombardi trophy. We'll be back tomorrow for another edition. Thank you all so much. From our family to yours on Pod TV, we wish you safety wherever you are. Thank you all. See you tomorrow.